Okay. So good evening and welcome. The Finance, Economics and Biz Club of IIT Delhi, Guwahati, Bombay, Roorkee, BHU and Kanpur present to you FinFest, India's first festival solely dedicated to finance and economics. I am Sahil Bohra, Executive Economics Club IIT Delhi, and will be moderating today's webinar. With us, we have Mr. Sandeep Das, who is going to speak on the future of B2C markets in the post-COVID times. Mr. Sandeep is an IIM Bangalore alum, a prolific writer, and a leading speaker. He has been a strategy consultant for over 10 years. Now, without taking much time of yours, I would like to invite Sandeep Das.
Thank you, Sahil. Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible,
Yes.
Sandeep.
So, thank you for the opportunity, and I welcome everybody who's listening to this talk on YouTube. And while the presentation is put up, I want to talk about why this topic is important in the first place today. So, let me start by what do you mean by B2C? And what you mean by B2C essentially is in terms of where people like you and I are the end consumers. That's what you mean by B2C. It typically means industries like FMCG. So you and I buy toothpaste. So FMCG, you and I buy television. So consumer durables. If you and I were farmers, we would buy seeds and fertilizer, meaning agriculture. You and I buy stuff from Amazon, so e-commerce. You and I use Uber and Ola, so transportation vehicle services. So a lot of industries cover and come under this gamut of B2C. And why this B2C matters is if you look at the GDP of our country, nearly 60% of our GDP comes from consumption, what people like you and I consume. So it's a majority of this, it's a majority of what our economy runs on, and it's driven across sectors. Now, if you go to the next slide, just continuing on that thought, the reason this topic is so important because consumption nearly constitutes 60% of our GDP and is a driver of growth. The other elements of GDP being exports, government spending, etc. And this is important also because this is one category that has actually been growing and expected to grow at 10 to 12% over the next 3 to 5 years. So, hence, this topic becomes extremely important. Now, what I'm going to do today, because I understand the profile of speakers who are listening to us, one, I'm going to talk about at a very macro level what are the big four trends that I'm seeing. These trends are likely to materialize over the next 2 to 5 years. So the four big trends you should keep together in across consumers. That's the first thing I will talk about. The next thing, I will take each of these trends and go into some level of detail. So, what do these four mega trends mean from a consumer behavior perspective, from a product perspective, from a technology perspective? What does it actually amplify in the real world? So, that's the second part I will look at in today's talk. The third thing I will actually look at is in terms of giving these four mega trends and the nuances of these mega trends, what opportunities arise in the next 3 to 5 years, which a lot of you can look at as potential entrepreneurs. And finally, if you want to make careers, you want to make careers in B2C industries like FMCG, consumer durables, agriculture, etc. What are some of the skill sets that you need to work on? And I'll talk about how you can build a relevant portfolio so that you are absolutely ready to succeed in this industry. So I'll start with the first question, and I intend to talk for about 40 to 45 minutes, and I'm happy to take as many live questions as possible after that. The first question I'm going to talk about is what are the four big mega trends that I'm seeing which are likely to materialize? And if you go to the next slide, you will see the four big mega trends that are likely to materialize over the next 3 to 5 years. So, Aside, if you can move to the next slide, please. And the first slide that you'll first point that you'll see is this talk of extreme localization. Now, what I mean by extreme localization is it's important to understand some context. In 2015-16, Unilever essentially came down and said that there is not one India, there is a million Indias within India. So what sells in Lucknow doesn't sell in Kanpur, what sells in Ahmedabad doesn't sell in Baroda, what sells in Mumbai doesn't sell in Nashik, and what sells in Bangalore doesn't sell in Mysore. Consumer behavior changes every 60 to 100 kilometers, and there are a million Indias within India, and that's localization. What you would have heard in this political rhetoric that everybody is looking inward. There is talk of reverse globalization in a way. So everyone's thinking in terms of smaller communities. Everyone's thinking in terms of very localized preferences. What is also likely to happen as post COVID that we will. So I know a lot of my friends, for instance, who have jobs in Bangalore but are staying in Mysore, or they have jobs in Bombay and they're staying in Goa. That there'll be a lot of small communities which will emerge outside the cities. So there's a lot of behavior towards localization where people will live in small communities. They will support their local communities in terms of you will buy from the local cafe, you will shop from the local bookstore, you will buy clothes from the local vendor. So there'll be a million Indias that will emerge from that one India. So that's one big mega trend that you see. The second big trend because of this localization is going to be the rise of nano influencers. Now, what this means is if you've looked at the history of marketing, ATL meaning TV or radio, has always been considered very effective in terms of reaching the maximum number of people. So many households in India have television. Then what happened is somebody said that ATL is only giving us reach, it is not giving us quality of engagement. So people started moving to Instagram and said, how do we target these big influencers who have 100,000 followers, 1 million followers, etc. Now what people have realized is some of these big influencers are also doing the same job as reach, and they might not be giving quality engagement. And hence, you will start seeing the rise of nano influencers. Nano influencers means actually people like you and I, people who have between 1,000 to 5,000 followers on social media. And we will start becoming the opinion makers in terms of what is sold and what is consumed. And you'll see a lot of this rise happening over the next 2 to 3 years. The next big mega trend that you will see is a focus on health and wellness. This is fairly obvious given what happened over the last year due to the pandemic. Mental health was at an all time low for people, and mental health is expected to be one of the biggest issues in the upcoming decade. So, focus on health and wellness is going to be immense in terms of a mega trend. What this also gets added on is an element of spirituality and going back to our roots. You will see Ayurveda has made a tremendous comeback with respect to certain products, whether it's FMCG and other associated wellness products. And you will see this trend accelerating even more towards the next decade. And the final thing, and the right point number 4 is while we say consumption is increasing, this is a slightly antithesis trend that if you look at some Asian economies, minimalism amongst Gen Z meaning people like you, is actually going to rise, which means a lot of you, when you come to the workplace and are loaded with incomes, you'll actually think about, do I really need to buy the latest MacBook? Do I really need to buy the latest Zara gown? Do I really need a lot of objects I have? And should I just live with what is bare essential? And you will see a huge rise in terms of minimalism amongst all of you. So these are 4 big mega trends that I am seeing over the next 3 to 5 years. And on the next slide, what I'm going to talk about is how these trends are going to translate into the ground, how these trends will translate across consumer behavior, across product preferences, across technology domain. So on the next slide, and Sahil, if you can go to the next slide, we'll look at these 4 mega trends, and I'm going to read from left to right. And you let me take you through what these 4 mega trends translate to. So let's start with consumer behavior. Now, what you will see from consumer behavior, and think of people like you and I, you are the consumer, and your behavior is going to drive this. So, over the pandemic, over the last year, you saw a lot of consumer behavior shift towards safety, hygiene, health. This was natural because of the pandemic. A trend that you will see is a lot of movement will happen towards responsible buying. Over a period of time, when people like you and I, over the next few years, start buying items, we will start thinking in terms of where is it being sourced from? Is the sourcing responsible? Are they employing child labor? Is it environmental friendly? Do I know if there are no toxic elements in it? A lot of responsible buying elements will start coming in. Is it carbon neutral? A lot of these elements will start coming into your behavior when you start buying items from now on. The second thing that is likely to happen is the replacement markets, whether it's fashion, whether it's auto, whether it's jewelry, you might start seeing the rise of replacement markets. A lot of people will start thinking that, do I really need to buy this first hand car? Because as soon as the first hand car leaves the showroom, it loses about 20% of its value. Or am I comfortable with a good working second hand car? People will start asking, do I need to really buy this new gown? Or can I just manage with a recyclable gown which is good for the environment? So you'll see a lot of this behavior moving towards replacement markets, and a lot of consumers, especially you, will really start thinking, do I really need the highest Hermes bag, or do I really need the most premium M&S gown? So a lot of this behavior will start coming into the limelight. The next big trend you will see is in terms of how you are consuming media. And this will resonate with all of you. A lot of you over the previous year, would have consumed media on Netflix, on Amazon Prime, and Hotstar. And about 8 to 10% of media consumption will be through OTT platforms. A lot of time you now spend on your phone. Most of you must be spending 4 to 6 hours daily on your phones. Some of you might have stopped watching television for some time, other than the India Australia cricket series. And this trend is likely to continue as you look at elements of consumer behavior. What this means for companies is, and some of you will take up these roles in analytics, in data scientists, on modeling programs, is the older consumer mapping algorithms which you had don't hold anymore, because consumer behavior has fundamentally changed after the pandemic. So earlier companies would look at last 3 years of data, and they would try and estimate what the future is basis the last 3 years. Unfortunately, the last 3 years of data don't hold true anymore. So for a lot of analytics companies, this will mean fundamentally creating new models or new sets of data in the first place. The next thing I'm going to look at is the second column now. What do these mega trends mean from a product preference? And the first thing that you will actually talk within the product preference is to look at elements of rural India. Now, rural India is going to be a huge driver over the next 3 to 5 years. If you look at FMCG, rural is about 35 to 40% of total sales. If you look at auto, it's nearly 45 to 50% of total sales. If you look at consumer durables, it's again in the line of 35 to 45%. So rural is a significant percentage of B2C industry. And what the government is focusing on is to double farmer income. You would have seen with the GDP reports last year that rural essentially saved the Indian economy from completely tanking, and will hold the Indian economy for the next 2 years. So with rural being such a big driver of growth over the next 2 to 4 years, what you will see is products will now become very rural centric, which mean that smaller packs, affordable packs, packs which are easy to use, packs, the new launches will be very rural friendly. So easy on the pocket, smaller sized SKUs, entry level SKUs. So a lot of that product innovation will start happening in rural India. Now, when you look at some of the urban India, especially when it comes to luxury, in terms of product preference, it is unlikely to change. So, from the second half of this year, you will see a lot of premium launches start coming in, a lot of premium launches across cars, across jewelry, across FMCG, consumer durables. You see a lot of premium launches will start coming back because consumer behavior will move towards that section. So, from an urban perspective, you will not see too much change, but there'll be a huge focus on driving rural product preference. Another set of consumer segment where specific products will be targeted at is the geriatric segment, meaning consumers who are 60 plus. Think of your parents, your uncles, your grandparents. And because this segment is substantial, nearly 10 to 15% of India's population, about 150 million people, most of them have a good ability to pay. So you will see very specific products will start coming for them now. When they, in case of phones, in case of gadgets, in case of books, a very specific set of products and services will start coming for this geriatric segment. Now, the next column I'm going to go to is channel preferences. How do these four mega trends translate from a channel perspective story. And the first thing you will hear is, let me just explain what are the various channels first. So the first channel is what you have, the local kirana, the unorganized trade, as you call it, where you just go to the neighborhood kirana, buy something, and come back. The second trade is something called organized trade, which is modern trade. Think of a big bazaar, think of a D-Mart. That's called organized trade or modern trade. And third is e-commerce. E-commerce meaning channels like Amazon, Big Basket, all of that is e-commerce. So these are three major channels across the various B2C industries. Now, what the pandemic has done is e-commerce in urban area has gone up. So e-commerce historically used to be, say, in B2C industries about, say, 4 to 5%. In urban areas has moved to 8 to 10%. And in course of time in urban areas, e-commerce might reach levels of, say, where South Korea is, where it's about 16 to 20%. However, a lot of people said that the kirana would die, the local kirana would die, that people would not buy from the local kirana. And everyone's been amazed actually how the local kirana has stayed resilient during the last 1 year. And you have to understand why, because the local kirana, there's an element of trust. So think of you when you were students, you would always buy the local chips packet from the local kirana. You know the person for 10 years, he gives you credit. And the trust values a lot. So going forward, the local kirana will actually stay and prosper, which means you will see a lot of companies trying to work with local kiranas going forward. Companies like GeoMart has started coming in to work with local kiranas. Amazon has started coming in. Google Phone Pay has started coming in to work with the local kiranas to get them online and to help them. So when some of you, when you start your own companies, when you come to the workplace, you will start working a lot with the local kiranas. The second big channel preference that has happened is there was this whole talk about how shopping behavior will be phygital, elements of physical and elements of the digital. So you do some research online, then you go to the store and you actually buy it. So that's phygital. And what this whole pandemic has done is only accelerated this complete shift towards the channel preference. A big trend that is likely to happen is in the nature of partnerships. What earlier used to happen is you'll be amazed that some competitors will start becoming partners. People whom you could have never thought can work together will start working together. So last year you would have seen that a lot of big FMCG majors like Marico, Dabur started working with the food delivery vendors like Swiggy and Zomato. And a lot of these partnerships will continue, what we call synergistic partnerships. And you will see a lot of partnerships that start rising over the next 2 to 3 years. So, in terms of channel, there's a lot of work that is happening in the channel front. The next thing in channel I want to speak about is something called direct to consumer, and you will hear this a lot. What direct to consumer essentially means is a company reaching to the consumer straight away without any intermediary level. So, for instance, you would have heard that Apple started its own brand site a few months back, and the site did really well. So, it's an Apple controlled site. You can go there, you can order the iPhone, MacBook, everything, and they will courier it to your house. One of the reasons why Apple has done so well last year in India is because of this direct to consumer platform. Similarly, you've heard of other FMCGs you might have heard who are trying to go direct to consumer. And this is a trend that will rise in pockets because eventually consumers trust the brand and they would rather shop from the brand directly. Moving to the fourth bucket, which is in terms of technology. Now, you would have seen a lot of memes on social media or Instagram saying that that Corona has essentially accelerated digital adoption more than what the CEO was trying to do, more than what the CIO was trying to do. And this is completely true. Across industries, you've seen that there's been a huge acceleration of technology, and this is only going to continue. Starting with how you buy. Now, think of how you would buy a flat earlier. Now the way you will buy a flat, and this will continue, is the first step of researching for a flat or looking at the apartment will happen online, and only the final step where you actually going the actual site visit will happen online offline. If you're looking at buying jewelry, a lot of the initial lead sourcing where you're actually evaluating the product, do you like it or not, will happen online. Only when you go to make the final purchase will you actually go to the Tanishq showroom. This behavior is being seen in automobiles where initially you want to read about the car, you want to see how the car looks, how does it feel to drive a car. will happen online. And only when you want to drive it or actually see the test drive will you go to the store and go offline. So the entire shopping experience is changing. If you go to some of the big organized malls now, you will see that there are virtual reality enabled mirrors. So you can actually see how you will look on that cloth, how you can look with different shades, different cuts, etc. And then you can actually go and make a purchase. And this is a huge change that is going to happen over the next 3 years. What will also happen is this entire chain in India, unorganized trade that we call the local stores, the numerous distributor workforce, the retailer workforce, all of them will start coming online. There's a huge automation opportunity with them. So if India has potentially 1 crore retail outlets, all of them will slowly start coming online, which means there will be technology to see their inventory, technology to understand how much stock do they have, do they need to have more, do they need to have less, can you reduce lost sales. All of this technology will start coming in. You have a lot of blue collar workforce which works with local trade partners like distributors and retailers. There'll be a lot of technologies in terms of how do we improve their productivity, how can we train them virtually, how can they use best business principles to drive sales. So there'll be a huge emphasis on sales force automation and taking the unorganized to the organized. Some other elements of technology is in terms of how people will work both at home and in office. Now, last year, what happened is a lot of people said that permanently a lot of people would work from home, and that is unlikely to be true, because what happens is if you work from home consistently, you don't feel good. Everybody misses the human touch. Everybody likes to go to the nice swanky office. So what is likely to happen is going forward that most people, and when you come into the workforce in a few years, two to 3 days a week you will come to office, 2 to 3 days a week you will actually work from home, and you will get used to this working mindset that occurs. Another big change which technology will do is the way you sell. It was always assumed that if you wanted to do sales, corporate sales or channel sales, that the physical element mattered a lot, and some of those barriers have been broken down. So going forward, a lot of you say, even when you're pitching to VCs for your own businesses, you will actually do this remotely. Your VC will be sitting in the Bay Area and you will be sitting in Bangalore. You don't have to go to the Bay Area anymore, and people will get used to this way of working. So this is in terms of how it will get played on the technology front. Now, I've given a lot of commentary in terms of how the world is going to change. Let me give you commentary in terms of what I think are some of the big opportunities which some of you, if you're keen on pursuing, you might want to explore this very seriously. So this is the third part of today's discussion in terms of what are the 3, 4 big areas of opportunity that I see for B2C markets. And Sahil, if you can go to the next slide. So you have to understand the history of entrepreneurship that has happened in India. So from 2010 to 2020, a lot of talk was in terms of, can you find a new good idea, an idea which no one has looked at, an idea which is completely new, and can you be first to market? The decade of 2020 to 2030, the emphasis is not going to be on can you get a new idea, because most ideas have been taken care of. The entire focus is going to be on execution and can you do something better than everybody else. The first big opportunity is going to be that there is a market for everything as long as you can get a niche. What this means is you can think of a new toothbrush, and if it is slightly better than the existing toothbrush which Colgate gives, there will be enough niche market for this. Think of how Bombay Shaving Company, think of how Nika with its personal care products are doing very, very well. Coaching centers. So if you think you can teach IIT coaching, and this market has dominated, completely dominated, but if you believe you can do IIT coaching well, you can go to one city, start a coaching center, and you'll be amazed that you will have enough market. Because of localization, because of nano influencers, whatever you can do, if you can pick a niche, you will do very, very well. In the education space, the business education space is on the verge of being disrupted. And if you say that I am going to teach mathematics for MBA students, and that's the niche I will operate in, and I will scale that up, you will do extremely well. So whatever you do, as long as you can pick a niche, and you will have enough market. The second big opportunity, and probably the biggest opportunity of this decade, is going to be how to address this problem of mental health. Mental health is going to be one of the biggest issues of this decade. The single biggest reason behind suicides, depression, unnecessary mental health issues, it translates to cardiovascular issues, etc. Now, what are the opportunities with mental health? How do you build an ecosystem to get counselors? There are some startups in this space, but the opportunities are immense. How do you build the right coaching content? How do you build the right set of videos? How do you just hold on to people? How do you identify who's going through a potential problem? And this is a huge opportunity, one of the biggest opportunities, untapped opportunities, not just in India, but across the globe. The second associated opportunity is about spirituality. You would have seen that there's a lot of talk about going back into our roots, and a lot of people are actually going back to our roots with this entire conversation of Ayurveda over the last 4 5 years with Patanjali and Unilever. They've really taken this plank and taken to the next level. And if you think of spirituality, think of how you can combine Hare Rama, Hare Krishna with some South Korean pop. And if you can say that I am an IITian and I will combine Hare Rama, Hare Krishna with South Korean pop, you are sitting on $1 billion opportunity literally with spirituality. The next thing is in terms of the pursuit of alternate careers and becoming influencers. Now, I know a lot of, I shouldn't be stereotyping, but I have heard a lot of IITians try to get into IIT because their parents force them, they're brilliant, so they make it. But it is not something they like to do. Some of them want to become theater artists, some of them want to become sportsmen, some of them want to become writers, authors, even pursue cooking. So the good news for you is this is the decade where you're going to make it. There's a lot of opportunity become pursuing alternate careers. There are huge sources of income. There are sources of income where you can become influencers. There are sources of income when you can pursue niches. There are sources of income where you can actually teach at certain institutes. So if you want to pursue an alternate career, this is going to be the decade for it where you can make tremendous money. Even if you don't want to pursue an alternate career, if you just have a hobby for watching sport, hobby for buying shoes, hobby for just cooking, hobby for trying new clothes, becoming influencers, and I spoke about the rise of nano influencers, is going to be very, very lucrative over this decade. So each of you, without funding, without having an institution, if you can just become an influencer and then try to scale it up, you'll be amazed at how much you can succeed in that. The fourth big set of opportunity that exists is organize the unorganized. This is an opportunity that has existed over the last 10 to 15 years. Some people have tried to cash into it. So organize the unorganized, meaning what Ola and Uber did. They looked at transportation which was unorganized, they tried to organize it. A lot of FMCG players are doing this, where they're trying to say, how do we organize the local kiranas? And there will always be opportunities for this, whether you're looking at organizing domestic help, the maid servant economy, if you're looking to organize a shoe polish, if you're looking to organize laundry, if you're looking to organize any of the unorganized services, there is enough market. There is no concept of first mover advantage here. There is enough niches that can be explored to look at organize the unorganized. So there are a lot of opportunities, and some of the points I want to leave behind with you are: first mover advantage no longer works here. A good idea with a small niche, with a small region executed well, is sizable enough. So concepts like first mover advantage, concepts like that you need to have a minimum network effect or a minimum size to succeed, are sort of becoming outdated. You can just pick a niche, succeed in that, and you'll be amazed at how well you can do. So this is the third part in terms of opportunities, and I'm happy to take your points and discussions when we go into the Q&A session. I'm moving to the fourth part in terms of, if you want to make careers, and Sahil, if you can move to the next slide, if you want to make careers in B2C industries, if you want to make, say, non-tech careers, and I've heard a lot of people who come to IITs, and this is a stereotype and I could be wrong, that they're interested in making non-tech careers. So if you want to make careers in e-commerce, if you want to make careers in FMCG, if you want to make careers in, say, using technology to drive agricultural efficiency, if you want to make careers in consumer durables, what are some of the skill sets you should have? There's a lot of emphasis in our education system on analytical prowess, how good your mathematical IQ is. But unfortunately, that won't take you very long in life if you want to succeed in B2C industries. What you need to succeed in B2C industries are the skills that are written on the slide. And I'm going to go through each of these, and I'm going to talk about what the skill means, why is it important, and how can you acquire it during your engineering days at IIT. The first thing, and this is the most important skill set, whichever industry you want to do in, whatever you want to do in life, is the ability to listen. What does the ability to listen mean? When someone else is talking, whether it's a consumer, it's a trade partner, it is a supplier, or even your partner in life, the ability to not say anything till that person, he or she, finishes talking, and not come with a mindset that whatever is saying, let me just rebut, is the ability to listen. This ability to listen becomes important because you need to understand consumer feedback, you need to understand what your boss is telling you in office, you need to understand what your partner is telling you at home. Now, a lot of us, maybe because we're Indians, we always tend to think that when conversations are made, how do we rebut? How do we come with a counterpoint? How do we prove we are right? And that's when now a lot of us don't have the ability to listen. So, how do you actually develop this ability to listen? This is how you can try it. Simple hacks. One, when a person is talking, never interrupt. When a person is talking, take a notebook and just try and write down as much as you can what the person is saying without interrupting. Don't have the mindset that he's right, he's wrong, how will I rebut? Just keep writing down what they're saying and never interrupt. Once they have finished, take 30 seconds, read through your notes, and then try to come up with what you want to answer. This is one of the easiest ways to cultivate this great habit of listening. And if you want to make very strong sales and marketing careers in life, you need to be excellent at listening. The second thing, and again with this stereotype, is that a lot of engineering students in India might not be very good with their people skills, and this is a stereotype, need not be true. So, how and is working with people important? Absolutely, it's a very very important skill to succeed in any industry, not just B2C industries. You need to have the ability to work with your consumers, your trade partners, your peers, your investors, the leadership board. You need to have an ability to work with all of them. Now, how do you develop this ability? Because a lot of us through school or college have only been focusing on getting the best entrance exam and picking into the best institute. The way you cultivate this habit is actually to get into your extracurricular. So you are in one of you are in India's best institutions right now. So pick up some extracurriculars where you have to work with people. So if you like sports, start playing cricket, start playing football, whatever you can. If you like theater, get into theater, work in team activities. If you are interested in politics, actively join student politics. If you want to change something on yourself, go ahead. So whatever extracurriculars you can, whether it's sports, whether it's student politics, whether it's even just writing some project report with four other people, get into it as much as you can. Get into event organization, get into sponsorship, get into organizing any cultural fest. You will be amazed at how much you will learn working with people. If I'm moving to the third skill right now, which is the ability to storytell. And if you have read a lot of books like Sapiens, they say one of the reasons why the human race has managed to survive compared to all other species, it's because of its ability to storytell. And storytell means creating a shared vision of what the end state is. Why is this important for you when you come to this next decade? The reason storytelling is so important is, please try and understand the workplace of the future. A lot of employees will be at home, a lot of employees will be at office, a company will have global offices. So the physical touch will really not be there. The time zones will be different. And during this part, it's very important to create a shared vision of what you're trying to pursue. Storytelling is about creating shared vision. Storytelling is about being effective debaters, effective narrators, effective marketers. And it's going to be one of the biggest skills of this decade. So how do you actually learn storytelling? Now there are books to do it. I mean, in my book I cover a lot of storytelling, hacks for life and career, a millennial's guide to making it big. But the best way to learn storytelling is in terms of go to IMDb, look at the top 100 movies, and just see all the movies that you can. And that's the best way to learn storytelling in terms of how script writing is done. Watch a lot of sports documentaries. So some of the sports documentaries I saw is one which is available on Netflix called Last Dance. It is about Michael Jordan, who came back to win his sixth NBA title. It's a brilliant piece of storytelling. Go and watch that. Watch the storytelling on CSK's return. It's on Hotstar, in terms of how MS Dhoni won the IPL in 2018. Watch some of these great documentaries. You will get elements of storytelling, and then you can read specific books in terms of how you can pursue this. And the final thing, and probably one of the most important, is to understand economics and behavioral psychology. This is very, very important as a branch if you have to move and succeed forward, because a lot of your discussions you will have in your workforce, whether you're starting your own firm, whether you're studying, whether you're working somewhere else, you'll have a lot of human to human contact. And you need to understand how to do well in these human transactions, whether it's negotiation, whether it's just pushing back to your boss, whether it's a salary negotiation, whether it's winning a contest or winning a pitch. And elements of behavioral psychology are going to be very, very important. So, how do you do a negotiation? So, at what point do you walk out of a negotiation? How do you threaten someone without really threatening someone? Some of these elements is what this newest branch of economics, behavioral psychology, will actually teach you. And you need to master it. So, how do you master it? The easiest way is to read a lot of good books. You have books like The Nudge, you have books like Misbehaving. There are so many other books you can pick up. You can look at my book again. I cover behavioral psychology, and that's what you will need to succeed. So, the point I want to leave behind is what you have been told till now, that you really need to succeed in the workplace. You need strong analytical ability, you need to numerical ability, you need to be the smartest in the batch, is actually only 10% of what it takes to succeed. The four phrases that are written on this slide is what 90% it takes to succeed at the workplace, whether you're starting your own firm, whether you're studying in the US, or you're working for somebody else. So, this is the fourth part which I wanted to speak about. And moving to the last slide, in terms of Sahil, if you can move on, if you have patiently managed to hear till now, you can all reach out to me on social media. I'm very active on social media. If you want to bounce certain questions, if you want to bounce certain advice, I'm active on LinkedIn. I have a YouTube channel which I cover some of these topics. I'm active on Twitter and Instagram. So please do reach out. Like I said, my third book, Hacks for Life and Career, A Millennial's Guide to Making It Big, was debuted, was released in November, and the book has done extremely well. It is number one on Amazon's hot releases. It's number two on Amazon business bestsellers. It's been featured by a host of magazines. And a lot of what I spoke about in today's session in terms of the necessary skill sets of storytelling, in terms of psychology, in terms of ability to listen, I cover in the book. I cover a lot of how do you really get started with entrepreneurship, how do you set up your own firm, what are the mistakes you should avoid. I cover elements of personal finance. And this is a book which I wrote so that I can help millennials and Gen Z succeed in their life. So please do check it out. And in either case, so do reach out to me on social media. I'm happy to have as many conversations as you want. So this is what I had to say, and I'm happy to take any questions or conversations you might want to have after this.
So Sandeep, we have some questions in the YouTube live chat, and I'll ask you, and you can answer.
Sure.
We have one question: that how do you ensure that the data you analyze doesn't have any bias?
See, that's a good question, and you have to understand. See, there are fairly standard techniques to actually reduce elements of bias. One is you obviously go for larger sample sizes. So, if you're sure, if you think your sample size is too small, you try to make your sample sizes as large as possible. That is one element of reducing bias. You try to ensure that all variables are taken care of. A lot of it is also in terms of the quality of the modeling. You look at the adjusted R squares, they should be above a certain niche. So there are fairly statistical methods to look at how you can remove bias. What is effective in the real world is also to look at qualitative research. So if you go and speak to say 100 consumers, you'll have a very good knack of what is really happening in the ground. And then you'll actually look at data to say, is it really saying the same thing, at least directionally? And that is one great way to actually remove bias from quantitative insights, is when you actually have qualitative insights with consumers and trade partners, and both of them should start adding up. So that's how you can look at removing bias.
Okay, I hope that clears the question. So the next question we have, that how can one tap into the market of spiritual products, given that it's really difficult to find genuine people who have the knowledge of the spiritual text?
Yes, and this is a very good question. You should see what people in the US have done. Some of the pastors who've actually established networks, they have tried to create a brand, they have tried to create a community where like minded people have been brought in, they have created the right set of textbooks. So it's about building a new business, and some of you should study how the pastor network in the US works, and that's how they have made tremendous money. It's about setting up a new business.
Okay. Okay. So the next question we have, that how does the B2C e-commerce market in India rank compared to other countries in the Asia Pacific and worldwide?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So if you see in terms of the metric that you typically use is percentage of total sales. So if you and I as consumers are buying 100 rupees, how much of that is coming from e-commerce? Now, if you see certain categories, like if you see grocery in India, e-commerce is about 2 to 4%. If you see FMCG, we are about 3 to 5%. If you see mobile phones, we are about 35%. Apparel is about 20%. So these are the numbers. So where does India stand, say, with respect to China? I'll take one category to give you an idea. So if you say food and grocery, in Asia Pacific, South Korea as a country is expected to be the best. It's about, if India say 2 to 4% going to 5%, South Korea is about 18 to 20%, China is about 8 to 10%. So that is how we rank compared to some of the Asian economies in terms of the percentage. If I look at a relative maturity, which I think that's what you wanted to know, if you take all the Asian economies, we are somewhere in the middle if you take all the major Asian economies in terms of maturity.
Okay. The next question we have from the audience is what should be the key initiatives taken by the government to revive our small scale retails and boost our economy after this COVID pandemic?
So you will come to know when Ms. Sitaraman talks about it in the budget this week. But
Sure.
I think a lot of the government has really tried very hard. You see what they have done over the last year in terms of enabling liquidity, guaranteeing some of the loans, provisions, and pulling out capital. So some of that is being done. They are encouraging startups and technology fronts. So the government is actually trying to do a lot, and the detailed answer actually you will get, I think, in the next 30 hours, which what Ms. Sitaraman is planning.
Yeah, yeah, we'll definitely. Okay, so the next question, can e-commerce and local kirana go hand in hand? If yes, then how will it affect the B2C market?
They will go hand in hand, and it's again a very good question. What you see with GeoMart, for example, they are going hand in hand. So you will actually buy online, and the delivery will happen through the store. That is what will happen. Overall, from a B2C perspective, it might not affect too much in terms of the size of the economy. So earlier, if you had two slices of bread every day, just because e-commerce and kirana going hand in hand, you will only have two slices of bread. You won't have more than two slices of bread. So the overall segment will be the same. It is just that the mix and the partners will work within themselves very differently.
Okay, yeah. The next question, how will capitalism play a role in redefining the local kirana stores?
You have to really think if we are a capitalist economy. We actually aren't. If you look at the Indian economy, we are actually what is called right of center. We are not a pure capitalist economy, and even the American economy is not. No, I think very few countries actually are a capitalist. We are actually, we try to take principles of capitalism, but we also have principles of socialism. And hence, what you will see what happens is the government will ensure the local kirana and the local retailers and traders are taken care of. So, if ever that happens, there is a policy mismatch where the e commerce players like Amazon are getting benefits which they don't deserve. You will see the government coming up with newer policies to make it a level playing field. So, that is how it will work. We are actually not fully capitalist.
Okay, so one question related to what you answered. Like, don't you think that these big e-commerce companies, these powerful companies, will eat up these local kirana stores, which we are seeing quite a bit that it is moving in that direction. But don't you think this will happen more in the coming times?
Yes and no, you have to understand, because e-commerce works in two different models. So one is where they have their own sourcing, which is Amazon Prime essentially, and they try and sell it to consumers. The other thing, what they are famous for, is the marketplace model, where your local kirana comes on that e-commerce platform and you buy from that. So a marketplace model can actually work very well for local kiranas or small time traders, because I'll give you an example. I bought a tripod stand recently. That tripod stand actually came from I think some place in Orissa. So, and that is not Amazon's. That's not Amazon's tripod stand. They're just connecting a supplier to me. So that's a marketplace. So e-commerce will drive a marketplace which can support local retailers. So it's a difficult question. I would say yes and no in terms of the impact.
Okay, okay. Uh, there's a question that what are your top five book recommendations for people of our generation?
The first one is on your slide right now. Without hesitancy, you should just go on Amazon and just buy
Sure.
that. I'm going to read from my bookshelf, and it's a good question. See, I think some of the books which I think have really helped me is you should read this book called Sapiens, which is about the history of human evolution. It's a little heavy, so just be careful with that. You should read this book called The Nudge, which is about behavioral psychology. And it's not about business reading. I believe you should also read other business books. Some of the best books I've read are, if you haven't read Shantaram, please pick it up. It's a beautiful book. It's about massive travel journeys across India. So Shantaram is a highly recommended book I have. I also like to see a lot of biographies and not read about them. So see a lot of biographies online. I always thought the Steve Jobs biography, which Ashton Kutcher played, was really nice. The Harshad Mehta biography that came recently was very, very nice. So watch a large number of famous biographies. There's a series on Netflix which is called The Death to 2020. It's on Netflix. It's a movie. Watch it. It's really, really nice. It's a sarcastic take on what happened last year. So these are my book recommendations. And in terms of how many should you read, I'm just going on this question a little more. At least what I believe is you should read 12 books a year, one a month is what you should do. And you should never read only books of one type. So don't just read business books. Keep a mix. Read about a few biographies. Read even chick lit. Read even popular fiction. So if you have 12 books, read across 3 to 4 genres, one book a month, and that will really help you.
Okay, okay. So now when I go through the chat section, I see most of the questions we have answered. Okay, and so now I'd like to wrap up this session. First of all, thank you so much, Sandeep, for this very insightful session. I'm sure our audience must have gained a lot from this. I personally have gained a lot from it, and I really thank you for coming and giving your time.
Thank you, Sahil. I hope people saw value in this session, and thank you for inviting me again.
Sure. It was nice hosting you.
Yeah, thanks. Sahil, are we back in the lounge? Or? Thank you, Sahil. I hope people saw value in this session.
Just a second.